Good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning, good morning. All right. Welcome to Daring Dialogues, and I'm your host, Shantae Charles. I hope everybody is doing well. Good news, good news. Apparently, Periscope has rolled out a new feature that I'm going to have to figure out how to use. So, let me go back. All right. If you can see and hear me clearly, put some hearts on the screen. This is actually a good feature. I just have to figure out where it is in order to use it. So I have to go back today and look at a Periscope tutorial on how to use the new feature. Yeah. So, looking at a couple of things here. Let me see if I can get this off the screen. Let me go back. There we go. All right. So, again, in the world of technology, there's always something new to learn because they're always changing things and things are always improving. Hopefully, it's an improvement. So, the new feature in Periscope, for those of you who all are techies, the new feature is a chat. So, I can actually, once I figure it out, excuse me, doing my personal grooming online. My hair is doing something funky back here. Uh, Once I figure it out, I can actually on Periscope, I'll be able to chat with up to 3 people at a time. So those of you who have not cracked your egg yet, we definitely want you to crack your egg. Because what's going to happen is your icon will come up top of the screen and we'll be able to hear you speak. So if we want to converse, it will be a new way for us to actually converse and have an online discussion about the topics in real time, which I think is a very, very exciting feature for Periscope. I don't know if they're going to eventually do it as video like Facebook, but I do like the audio component because at least you'll be able to hear the voice of the person who is making a comment as opposed to trying to read the screen. So, on my break, I will be figuring that out and I'll be trying to test it out. So, Prophet Jonathan or Lady Barbara or Pastor Ben, I will probably inbox you when I'm getting ready to do some of those testing features and see if you guys can work on that with me while I'm on break. All right. So, today is Teachable Tuesday. Teachable Tuesday. And today is episode 25. So we are a quarter of the way through season 5. And I do have a giveaway to do. I have 5 trivia questions to ask at the end of my broadcast. And you must email me the questions, email me the answers rather. And if you get all 5 answers, I will be sending you a nice Black History care package. It'll contain some things that have to do with Black history, and it'll also contain one of my favorite Black history books written by Martin Luther King Jr. All right, so that will be toward the end of this broadcast. I'll get into that. Also, if you want to become a subscriber, you can subscribe by going to patreon.com/daring dialogues for my bonus content. And depending on the level of your subscription, you will also get access to discounts to any products, goods, and services that I offer. All right. I will be returning February 15th to Daring Dialogues broadcast. But as I said, in between there, I will be doing some filming, but those filmings will be on the Patreon page for subscribers. All right. So let's get into our Teachable Tuesday for today. Since it is Black History Month, um, we've been seeing all kinds of shenanigans, right? We've been seeing people doing all kinds of ungodly things. It's almost like some people say, hey, it's Black History Month. Let's see how many times we can offend Black people in the month wherein they're supposed to be celebrating their culture, their legacy, and their heritage. That's what it seems like to me. So, it is what it is. So, the question that Dr. Claude Anderson asks in his book here, A Black History Reader, is this question. He asked the question, are Black people too race conscious? Well, you have only to turn on your television to figure out we're not too race conscious. The reality is, America has yet to deal with its very complicated feelings about Black people in this country. Anytime you can have a governor admit to doing blackface and admit to participating in a contest as Michael Jackson and smearing black polish on his face and joking about it, clearly we still have some issues with people not understanding what is offensive. Anytime you can have a well-known actor come out and say he wanted to kill any Black person after he found out a friend of his had been sexually assaulted, and we're assuming that that friend said that the person that assaulted them was Black, and the fact that you as an actor felt comfortable saying I want to kill any Black person, and then you want to turn around and say that's not racist or you're not racist, like, really? Really? I don't know. But um if somebody does some harm, right? Common sense would tell us to deal with the person that did the harm, right? Not put it off on a whole entire group of people. But again, this is America's legacy. This is America's legacy of blaming an entire group of people for the few. That's American legacy. All right. So if you're watching this in another part of the world and you're like, what is she talking about? I'm talking about the race relations that are specific to the United States. Yes, other countries have their issues, but America still has issues. America, oh America, what shall we say to thee? We shall say, God, please flippeth thou America and make her what you see. So, the question, are Blacks too race conscious? Dr. Claude Anderson says, Blacks are not too race conscious. In reality, they are not race conscious enough. As demonstrated by their dogged pursuit of social integration over the past 50 years, while the rest of America was balkanizing along ethnic and racial lines. Today, an increasing number of Black Americans are imploring Black people to rebuild Black community and spend their money with Black merchants. I happen to be a Black merchant. Clearly, the mere fact that Black Americans have to be encouraged to do what whites and other ethnic groups are already doing and do instinctively indicates that Black people are not race conscious enough to have a self-interest that puts their own people first. Unlike whites who identify and unite around their whiteness, which we've had a conversation about this before, that before they are female, they are white. Before they are LGBTQIXYZ, they are white. Before they're Republican or Democrat, they're white, as Ralph Northam clearly showed us this past week. So they're going to continue to unite around their whiteness before they unite around any other descriptor. He says here, blacks tend to lack a sense of oneness and solidarity that we used to have that is needed for group-based socioeconomic empowerment. Blacks have had short spurts of race consciousness in which they tried to come together to pool their resources in their own best self-interest, but those periods did not last long, and blacks rarely played as team long enough to prosper. And then we know when they did, there were jealous whites that came along and destroyed their levels of prosperity, which is why you have so many black people who are now polarized, because you have one group saying, hey, let's build, let's do this, let's get together, we can pool our resources, we can really do this if we come together. And then there's the other group saying, well, every time we build, they tear it down. So what is the point of building something if they're going to come along and try to destroy it? Let's not even try. So you do right now have these two differing points of view. All right. During 360 years of slavery, blacks could neither move nor assemble freely, and they couldn't do it without supervision. So they were literally treated like little children. All right? This is what happened. And so when you infantilize an entire community and then you turn around and say, man up and be responsible, you have to look at the damage that you have done as a society in infantilizing black people. Nobody wants to own up to that either. All right? So, he says, it was difficult at best for black slaves to develop a sense of unity when they lived in monitored cabins on scattered farms and plantations throughout the southern states. Slave drivers and plantation overseers conditioned black slaves to see life and the world through the eyes of white society in general and white slaveholders in particular. Without protection of the law, many blacks tried to protect themselves by professing love for their masters and all forms of whiteness. Just as it is in present day society, slaves were conditioned to believe that by advancing the interests of their masters in white society, they were advancing the interests of slaves collectively or themselves as individuals. During the post-Civil War period, millions of newly freed black people, for the first time, focused on being black and coming together in a sense of oneness. They could see the world through the eyes of a black consciousness instead of through the eyes of the slaveholders' whiteness. They began transforming their lives from usable property into exceptional human beings with special gifts. They used their new sense of group oneness to build black churches, black schools, black businesses, black newspapers, black social organizations, black banks, black insurance companies, black funeral homes and burial associations, black broom factories, mattress factories, black movie theaters, black factories for hair care products, and independent communities. It was in these quasi communities that blacks successfully began to store their history, their culture, their pride, and their businesses. An unintended result of Jim Crow segregation was that it forced black people to do what they should have been doing normally. And they owned and operated more businesses during segregation than they have under the illusion of social integration. During the 20 years between 1915 and 1935, race consciousness began to emerge again. Aggressive black visionaries like W.E.B. Du Bois called for black politics. Marcus Garvey called for black economics. Carter G. Woodson called for black culture and black education. Elijah Muhammad for Islam and a black nation. And the Harlem Renaissance celebrated black artists and entertainment. The sense of black racial consciousness was prevalent and profound, but it was short-lived. When the Great Depression ended in the late 1930s, institutionalized blacks, i.e., civil rights leaders, ministers, and newspaper owners felt there was too much blackness or race consciousness, and they began to call for Black Americans to seek inclusion into mainstream society. Well, we know that inclusion was really an illusion. We can look around us now and clearly see that though you may be technically included in many ways, the wealth of the Black community has not really increased overall. We're still in the process of first ever blah 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 blah, whatever it is, African American. It's 2019 and we're still making firsts. Just think on that. All right. So they urged the visionary Black leaders and their respective organizations to shift their focus from race consciousness to universality, another name for social integration. The march away from race consciousness toward social integration progressed into the 1960s civil rights movement. The civil rights movement, led by institutionalized Black leaders, began to clash with younger Black people, which would be today our millennials, who organized the Black Power movement and demanded more Black consciousness. The Black civil rights movement's push for social integration garnered more attention, acceptance, and respect within mainstream society because whites felt more threatened by the Black Power movement. All right. So you have a group of people saying, okay, we've had our time of Black consciousness. Let's begin to try to integrate. And the younger people were saying, no, we actually need more Black consciousness. So there was a clash between generations again. All right. In response to white anxiety of Black consciousness, the government intervened and destroyed the Blackness movement by distorting its activities and criminalizing its leadership. What's new today? It's the same thing. All right. So the government intervenes to crush an uprising, to crush a movement of Black consciousness. So whether that be Black Lives Matter, whether that be the new label that they have given Black people who want to focus on their heritage. Now they're calling all Black people who want to focus on their heritage Black identity extremists. It's the same premise. Anytime you want to have a consciousness about your own culture and where you come from, all of a sudden you're now labeled as dangerous. Your activities are distorted and your leadership either gets demonized or criminalized. These days, they don't even have to criminalize you. All they have to do is put a false accusation out about you to demonize you, and then people run away from you and they run away from whatever concepts you were presenting because now you're seen as the bad person, and therefore to associate with you or your teachings would make them bad. It's the same practice, okay? A few years into the civil rights movement, Black leadership abandoned Black race consciousness and pledged their commitment to public policies of political correctness involving immigrants, women, and various other minorities. Did Black leaders truly believe that whites would voluntarily give up their own race consciousness? That they would give up their own sense of oneness and white togetherness? Racism is a team sport, which means a group must play as a team or risk losing by default. Civil rights leaders, ministers, and elected officials soon abandoned all forms of exclusive Blackness. They joined mainstream white society's focus on fabricated classes like minority, diversity, open door immigration policies. They thereby allowed white society to capture and corrupt the civil rights movement, pervert the language of the civil rights movement and the goals of the civil rights movement, use Dr. King's concept of a colorblind society to extract race out of racism and demonize all forms of Black consciousness. So this means that if you're not down with the multicultural mumbo jumbo gumbo, where people use the term multicultural, but when you look at the actual results, you see that all the benefits are going towards everyone but black people, when the original amendment was based specifically on black people, but everyone else's needs is getting served and your community's needs is not getting served, then you get demonized for talking about it. All right? There are people right now who are demonizing the concept of a black agenda. Why would you demonize that? All right? Nobody is demonizing the LGBTQ community because they have a specific agenda that meets their needs for their community. Nobody is demonizing the Hispanic community because they have a specific agenda that meets the needs of their community. But when you say black agenda, oh, what do you mean? What do you mean? Black agenda. What? Black people want something. Oh my gosh. It's utterly ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Why should not black people have an agenda for our community? Let me continue. Just like during slavery, whites were more at ease with black people who operated in color blindness and accepted the racial status quo. What has been the status quo? The status quo has been black people be thankful and be grateful for any crumb that you get in this society. Even though your ancestors literally became the cash, the capital, and the credit for this society, you just need to be grateful. Just be grateful that people aren't just shooting you in the streets. This is the attitude that people have towards black people asking for what their ancestors never got. That was in fact owed to them. Slavery and Jim Crow semi-slavery in the United States did more than rob blacks of their individual dignity. It robbed them of their social cohesiveness and pride and discouraged cooperative behavior. Race consciousness is essential for self-sufficiency, but there are no mainstream incentives or rewards. So, to this day, African Americans are discouraged towards cooperative behavior. What does that mean? That means your sister or brother is selling a product and you're not really encouraged to support it. And this is whether your sister or brother is Christian, Muslim, whatever. You're not really encouraged to practice cooperative economics. And people will give you various reasons why. But you have to change that, and you have to make up in your own mind that you are going to spend your money in your community. So whether it's healthcare, whether it's food, whether it's clothing, right? You may have to go out of your way to spend your money with your own community because of how scattered and dispersed we are, unless you live in a major city. Like if you live in Detroit or you live in Chicago or you live in Baltimore, right? There are plenty of, or you live in Atlanta, there are plenty of businesses that are black owned that are within, walking distance of each other. But that's not necessarily the case when you go outside of your major cities. So it may take a little bit more effort from you to search out black owned businesses. Most towns, well, I won't say most towns, but most fairly large cities have what's called a Chamber of Commerce. And then some of them have a Black Chamber of Commerce, which actually lists all of the black businesses in your community. So, yes, it may take more intention from you, but it needs to be done. If you say, well, I look within a 20 to 30-mile radius and there's not really a whole lot of black businesses in my town or in my community, you can go online and look up black businesses and order from black businesses online. There's a whole website called WeBuyBlack.com, and it lists businesses by category. When people say Black Friday, I don't think Black Friday should be once a month. I don't think Black Friday should just be during the holiday season, right? Black businesses are open 24/7, 365 days a year, like all other businesses. So we not only need your support during holidays, we need your support anytime you are thinking about purchasing a good or a service. My husband is a black architect, a black photographer, a black artist, has a whole original art series. You want some art for your brand new home that you just bought? Why go buy something from Kmart or Walmart? Why not order a commissioned art piece that's designed specifically for your home? Yes, I plugged him because he's good at what he does. He is the cream of the cream and the crop of the crop. All right? So, yeah, he doesn't have Walmart prices, but you will get a piece that is of excellent quality, museum quality, and it will last. That's all I'm saying. So, buy from your community because, as Dr. Claude Anderson said, which is exactly true, they buy from their own community. We have a few Ashkenazi Jewish friends, and they are always, when I say always, they are always pointing us to one of their fellow Jewish friends in business. If we ask them about anything in the community, they're going to point you to a Jewish doctor, a Jewish lawyer, a Jewish insurance agent, a Jewish health care professional. They're going to do that. They are. And they're unapologetic about doing so. So why are we apologizing for supporting our community? Why? I just want to know. Somebody help me with that. All right. Let me get into my next book we're reading, Spare the Kids, Why Whooping Children Won't Save Black America. They get it, Prophet Jonathan said, and they are taught early on to do it. Yes, they are. So let's get back into this Spare the Kids. We were talking about Adrian Peterson and the Baltimore mom controversy. All right, we started talking about Adrian Peterson, and we started talking about these legal lines of physical discipline from child abuse and how it varies from state to state with no clear across the board definition. Now, the reality is the people that are encouraging black parents and black families to engage in this, and when I say engage in this, I'm talking about physically beating your child. These people also know that it's on the books that you can go to jail depending on how your state defines child abuse. So if you have been whooping your child all this time and no one said anything to you about it, and all of a sudden you get a knock on your door and you're being reported for child abuse, and you get taken into custody and you say, well, I've been doing this the whole time and nobody said anything, that's not going to help you in a court of law. Sometimes people allow you to do things and then they use what you're doing to hang you. I hope I said that in a way that can help some black parents who are practicing this, because you may see it as I'm just physically disciplining my child, but your state may define it as child abuse, and you could be going to jail for a long time. Because keep in mind, the prison system does need slaves. Just want to help some of y'all. It does need slaves. So if you're making it easier for them to bring you into this slave labor, then they're going to roll with that. And a lot of people and people are aware that whooping your child is common in black community. They already know this. So let me read you some of the things here about how it's defined, and then we're going to go a little bit into Peterson, the NFL player. According to the American Bar Association Center on Children and the Law in Washington, D.C., some states allow spanking, paddling, and switching if administered in a reasonable manner. Now, the question becomes, under the law, who decides what is a reasonable manner? While others, such as Texas, allow reasonable physical force when and to the extent believed necessary to maintain discipline. Other states don't specifically prohibit corporal punishment, even when it results in a serious injury to the child, as long as deadly force was not utilized. But how do you determine whether a child is acceptably bruised or not? Who gets to define reasonable? Leaving it to angry and frustrated parents caught up in the heat of the moment results in parents such as Adrian Peterson being arrested, or worse, children actually being killed. The day after his CBS interview with Jim Rohn, Charles Barkley appeared on the Dan Patrick radio show and did not back down from his stance. He admitted to punishing his daughter, who is now an adult. I hope I never crossed the line. She was spanked pretty good a few times, and she probably deserved it, Barkley said. Reflecting on his own childhood whoopings again, he said, I'm pretty sure my grandmother, who was the greatest woman who ever lived, may have crossed the line at times. But you know what? I feel pretty good about the person I am today. This kind of celebration of our elders whooping us is too often viewed as a sign that the wounds have healed and that the scars are calloused and the pain has resulted in strength and good character that we might not have developed without the violence. Barkley wasn't alone in his sympathy for Peterson and defense and celebration of whooping kids. On a different segment, the retired NFL running back Ricky Williams, who just a few years earlier was often cited as an example of what is wrong with today's professional athletes, also told Rome that whooping children is status quo in the black community. Williams said his mother beat him and he turned out fine. If such discipline were considered illegal, Williams said, my mom would be under the prison. Rome noted that Peterson hit his son in the testicles and asked Williams, you don't have a problem with that? I don't, Williams replied. Meanwhile, Detroit Lions running back Reggie Bush appeared on the Boomer and Carton show on WFAN in New York, and he said he had been punished the same way that Peterson whooped his son. I know a lot of my friends and a lot of guys I played with, they were punished the same way too. I got what we call whoopings. Bush went further by saying that he planned to discipline his infant daughter similarly. I definitely will try to. Will obviously not leave bruises or anything like that on her, but I definitely will discipline her harshly depending on what the situation is. After his comment drew outrage, Bush said he misspoke about using a switch on his daughter. Spanking is different than a branch or stick, he said. I believe in spanking a child if needed, not beating them. A chorus of black male athletes also used Twitter to voice their support for Peterson and to reflect on how whoopings had made them better people. Utah Jazz power forward Trevor Booker recalled having to pick his own switch. New Orleans Saint running back Mark Ingram Jr. and Arizona Cardinals defensive end Darnell Dockett implied that love validated the countless whoopings they received. Phoenix Suns forward Anthony Tolliver credit being beaten with switches and belts with saving his life. A few people used their platforms to speak out against what Peterson did and the broader culture of accepted abuse. Most notable was Chris Carter, a Hall of Fame football receiver and sports analyst who spoke emotionally about his own upbringing during an appearance on ESPN's Sunday NFL Countdown. He recalled how his single mom raised 7 children by herself and used physical discipline as a parenting tool. My mom did the best that she could do. There were thousands of things I've learned since then that my mom was wrong. This is the 21st century. My mom was wrong. And I promise my kids I won't teach that mess to them. You can't beat a kid to make them do what you want them to do. But for the most part, the comments by Barkley and many other black athletes hit home for many millions of black Americans. That's because the majority of black parents in America, not just in the South, view hitting children as synonymous with good, responsible parenting. Researchers have consistently found that more black parents spank their children than those of other ethnic groups. For example, in 2014, the Maryland based research organization Child Trends found that 81% of black women, as opposed to 62% of Latino and white women, agreed that a child sometimes needs a good, hard spanking. Asian women were least likely to agree. The research also found no significant difference for men along racial lines. And while many people assume that only poor, uneducated single black moms are most likely to agree to spanking, surveys conducted for more than 3 decades have found that a greater percentage of black women who are childless, married, or have attended college agree that children need to be physically punished. Sadly, hitting children who can't protect themselves has become a part of our cultural DNA and identity. For many black parents, not spanking your child is viewed as selling out or acting white. We mock our parents who use timeouts, who take away phones and iPads as punishment, and who employ verbal reasoning with children. We scoff at their privilege and how nice it must be to have the luxury of ignoring the misdoings of your children in public spaces. Only those with privilege have time to read parenting blogs and books about positive discipline. Only those who don't have to worry about being seen as another bad black parent can think that no TV time for little Connor and Becky will lead to them knowing how to act right in the world. This kind of racialized mockery has become part of how we rationalize hurting black children's bodies. The embrace of whoopings isn't only about affirming our blackness, like celebrating Kwanzaa or knowing the words to the black national anthem. The decision to whether to physically discipline our children is seen as one of life or death. Embracing alternative parenting styles is viewed as risky, one that might lead to unruly children who don't know how to act, or worse, invite the violence of American racism. Meanwhile, as increasing numbers of white folks continue to explore nonviolent methods of child rearing, black folks have convinced ourselves that we must whoop our children because if we don't, then the police will beat them, lock them up, or kill them. If that is our reasoning, how is that parenting strategy actually working for us? Because police are beating them, locking them up, and killing them, whether you beat them or not. Look at the weekly numbers. Look at the weekly murders of black children across the country and the epidemic of locking up our adolescent children. Here's the logic that's illogical. If whooping our children kept them from being killed by the police, then why are activists in the streets protesting police brutality? If whooping our children has been successful at keeping black people out of prisons, then why are we having a national conversation about mass incarceration? Black parents are taught and teach one another that the only way to protect children from the violence of white racism is to actually mimic the violence of white racism. Does that sound logical to you? They become vilified and punished for doing this. As Black parents perpetuate the culture of physical discipline against their own children, white America argues that violence, including whooping children, is exceptional and unique to Black people, even though white people are the ones who taught us to whoop and break the will of our children during slavery. So, something that was initiated during slavery by white slave masters is now being sold to us as Black culture. And Black people haven't figured this out yet, that this is not our culture. Part of this logic also embraces racist beliefs that we are inherently criminal, that we are destined to be menaces to society, and that the only way to break the cycle of crime and poverty in our communities, this inherent criminality, is to beat it out of your children, which is actually racist ideology. We keep whooping our children, yet the U.S. Department of Education has reported that half of all preschoolers suspended more than once are Black. Preschool. We keep whooping our children even as students of color face harsher punishments in school than their white peers, even though they are less likely to engage in bad behavior. So, when people keep asking, why is the rise of suicide? Why is suicide on the rise amongst young Black children? Think about it this way. If you're being punished and brutalized at home, and you're being punished and brutalized in school, what would be your reason for wanting to exist? I mean, you go to school, you're being punished, or you're seen as the problem child in the classroom. You go home and you get punished. You go to school, you get punished. You go home, you get punished. You go to school, you get punished. You go home, you get punished. Where is the freedom to be a child? I'm just saying. We gotta look and think about what is actually happening. You're being teased and bullied and taunted in school. You're seen as a troublemaker. You go home, your parents slap you upside the head. You might get cussed out. They might hit you. They might send you to your room, etc. So if you're getting bullied at school and your parents are abusive at home, chances are you're not going to come home and tell your parents that you're being bullied at school. So when they find little Bobo hung in the closet at home, and then the parents say, well, I knew he was being bullied at school, but I ain't really think anything of it. Now I got to ask, what were the parents also doing at home? Because it's not normal behavior. It's not normal behavior, okay, Lady Judy? It's not normal behavior for a child to go into that sense of despair and hopelessness and kill themselves. We're talking about children that's 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old, that's taking themselves out. All of these factors lead to a higher number of youth of color being incarcerated. We continue to use a negative to prevent future negatives. Think about the logic of that. I don't want my child to get beat, so I'm going to beat my child. That's the logic. Our fear that saying no to whooping kids will lead to a life of crime and pathology is without any basis in fact. We keep telling ourselves that whooping our children will protect them, even though research at Villanova University in 2013 found that darker skinned black students were more likely to be suspended than black students with lighter skin. We keep whooping our children even though researchers have found no evidence that they are more likely to misbehave than any other group of children, even though they are suspended and expelled at higher rates. We keep whooping our children even as they remain overrepresented in our nation's foster care system, which has become a feeder for the juvenile justice system and the adult prison system. In some states, such as California and Illinois, up to 80% of adult prisoners have had contact with the foster care system as a direct result of child abuse. And in Connecticut, 70% of juveniles in confinement have histories with foster care. So, they're a prisoner now, but they were in juvenile detention centers. And there was a direct correlation between foster care, and they were in foster care ultimately because of child abuse. But we say, or we think, that the beating is going to prevent them from winding up where these people have actually wound up because of, if you trace it all the way back, child abuse. We keep whooping our children even though, according to data from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, in the past 10 years alone, whooping children has resulted in nearly 280,000 reports of physical abuse against black children, with more than 758,000 of our young black children entering foster care because of physical and other types of abuse and neglect. Even more horrifying is that during that same time period, 3,839 black children died as a result of maltreatment, with about 40% of those victims being those of physical abuse. So you want to talk about police killings of black children, but you don't want to talk about the 3,839 black children that are being killed by their own black parents. That's a problem. That is an average of about 380 fatalities a year from our own community. We're saying Black Lives Matter, but 380 children a year are dying from child abuse. It is true that children of other races also lose their lives as a result of abuse, but the rate of fatalities is consistently 3 times higher for black people. When we look at these awful statistics, a disturbing truth begins to emerge. In addition to the threats from trigger-happy police officers and gun-toting men standing their ground, the safety of black children is also under peril from a culture of whooping children leading to their death. Very true. Stop that narrative altogether, because we have to take care of our own communities. It's not an if or, it's an and also. We don't want people outside of our community killing us for no reason. And then we also shouldn't want people in the community abusing and killing each other for no reason. We should be covering both. This is a public health crisis, and yet many black folks continue to loudly and proudly describe how they bring pain to their children through whoopings. And they see it as a sign of strength, a source of humor, and essential to shaping them into successful people they are today. I grew up being whooped. It is a false cultural norm. It's not even our cultural norm, but it has been attached to us. But we gonna unattach it in Jesus' name. So I want to thank you for listening today to Spare the Kids: Why Whooping Children Won't Save Black America. Every parent, every black parent needs to get this book and read it. I want to thank you also for joining us in A Black History Reader by Dr. Claude Anderson, discussing today about, are blacks too race conscious? And the answer to that is, we're not racially conscious enough. Everyone else is, and they will tell you not to be. If you would like to subscribe to get bonus content, you can go to patreon.com Daring Dialogues /Daring Dialogues for bonus content. I will be taking a break, but I will be filming what I'm doing on my break and putting it on patreon.com. Also, I will be returning February 15th for our Daring Dialogues episodes. And now, with our last, yes, he recently discussed about immigration. It was powerful. I did see that video. And now, I'm going to do my trivia. You must answer all 5 correctly. And the first to answer all 5 correctly will get my Black History Care Package. All right. And yes, Patreon is cool. I like Patreon. You can email me your answers at reachshante@gmail.com. There's my address, email address down there, reachshante@gmail.com. Also want to thank my We Dare Squad partners who are not yet on Patreon, but I'm encouraging you to get on Patreon so that you can get the bonus content. Thank you for your giving. All right, so everybody ready? I got 5 questions. Listen to the questions. They are they're multiple choice. So you will have some choices. All right, so it's not just you having to pull the answers out of the blue. I will take letters, so you don't. That's funny. Jesus, Holy Ghost, the disciplines, praise break. The spirit was high today. Did I win? Prophet Jonathan. All right, here we go. Let me make sure I'm putting the right cards in here. All right, there are 5 questions. 5 questions, and all you have to do is give me the letter answer. You don't even have to type out the whole word or the whole name or none of that, okay? But they have to be correct. They have to be correct. Question number 1. The week-long celebration, Negro History Week, which was expanded in 1976 and is now known as Black History Month, was started in 1926 by who? Please do not put your answers on the screen. You need to write down the letter, and then you need to submit your answers by email. All right. Was it A, Ralph Bunche, B, Nat Turner, C, Carter G. Woodson, or D, John M. Langston? Who was Black History Month started by in 1926? Was it A, Ralph Bunche, B, Nat Turner, C, Carter G. Woodson, or D, John M. Langston? Question number 2. Question number 2. Who was the first Black female aviator? Who was the first Black female aviator? Was it A, Dr. May Carroll Jemison, B, Rachel A. Lucas, C, Bessie Coleman, or D, Phyllis May Daly? Prophet, stop it. First black female aviator. A. May Carol Jemison. B. Ruth A. Lucas. C. Bessie Coleman. Or D. Phyllis May Daly. All right. Number three. Number three. Who was one of the planners of what is now Washington, D.C.? Who was one of the planners of what is now Washington, D.C.? Was it A. Booker T. Washington, B. Frederick Douglass, C. Hiram Rhodes Revels, or D. Benjamin Banneker? All right, that was question number three. Who was one of the planners of what is now Washington, D.C.? Question number four. Who was the first African American male to run for president? Who was the first African American male to run for president? Was it A. Frederick Douglass, B. Malcolm X, C. Jesse L. Jackson Sr., or D. Martin Luther King Jr.? And nobody better get that wrong. Oh my goodness. Last question. Question number 5. Kunta Kinte was one of the characters in what Alex Haley book? A. Beloved, B. The Quarry, C. The Color Purple, D. Roots. And again, nobody better get that wrong. All right. So, question number 1. Black History Month was started by who in 1926? Question number 2, who was the first black female aviator? Question number 3, who was one of the planners of what is now Washington, D.C.? Question number 4, who was the first African American male to run for president? And question number 5, Kunta Kinte was one of the characters in what Alex Haley book? All right. I expect to see some answers in my email. All right. The first person to get all 5 of them right will get my Black History Care Package. All right. So I want to thank you for joining me in episode 25 and making it through our first quarter of season 5. I appreciate you. I encourage you to make this week coming up a great week. Make sure that you're out and about serving someone in some capacity. If you are, stop, Pastor Ben. If you are not African American, can I encourage you to go this month, especially, and support Black business owners? All right. Go to the website, WeBuyBlack.com. Okay. Deacon Henry, I will be offline off of Periscope until February 15th. So come back and join me February 15th, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you want to see what I'm doing behind the scenes, you can join patreon.com/Daring Dialogues. And my bonus content will be on there. Some of you will get a sneak peek as to what I'm doing before I announce it. All right. So if you are not a African American this month, go and support African American businesses. There's a whole list of them on WeBuyBlack.com. So nobody has any excuse. Buy something. Buy a shirt, buy a pair of shoes, buy a hat, buy something. Support. Or you can join daringdialogues.com patreon.com, /Daring Dialogues. All right. All right. Thank you for being a support here. As I said, I got to go learn this new feature on Periscope so that we can have some audio conversations back and forth live. That's a new feature. If you came in late, Periscope has added another new feature that broadcasters need to go learn. All right. So remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness. So please go out today and be light. Take care and see you February